CBS Sports had a relatively low ranking for the Washington Wizards in their latest front office ranking. I understand it can be a little frustrating if you're a Wizards fan, but I think the sentiment is the winning has to start soon. Today we bring on Nick Ashooh. This is Locked On Wizards.
You are Locked On Wizards, your daily Washington Wizards podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
DC family, you are locked on to the Washington Wizards, where you're part of our family. We thank you for making Locked On Wizards your first listen every single day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, free and available every single day. We thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network in the nation. Alongside the DC sports content creating savant Abdullah Ayubi, I'm Ben Strober, and I cover the Washington Wizards for Roundtable.io. And today, we are honored to have Nick Ashooh join the program. He is a host with 106.7 The Fan, also part of the Locked On family with Commanders Squad coverage. Be sure to check him out there, and also host his own show called Game Day Garage. Be sure to check it out on YouTube. Nick, how you doing, my friend?
I am good. How you guys doing?
Not bad. AB, how you doing, man?
I don't know. This CBS article got me feeling different. I know a lot of Wizards fans were upset about it, but I'm excited to dive into it.
Yeah, we're going to dive into that on today's show. We talk about Sam Quinn's CBS Sports article. The Wizards front office came in at 22nd, actually dropped 4 spots in those rankings. We'll talk a little bit about Anthony Davis and Trae Young, what Nick thinks the long-term plans could be for those two guys. And then we have a little bit of a broader NBA discussion. Maybe we talk a little bit about the KD files or whatever fun stuff we can come up in that third and final segment. Nick, Wizards come in at 22nd on the list. Wizards Twitter is up in arms about it. A lot of people think that Will Dawkins and Michael Winger deserve a lot more credit than Sam Quinn is giving them here. Based on your analysis of the ranking here, do you feel like the Wizards are ranked too low at 22?
I think one of the issues is, and I'm looking at it right in front of me here, not that I haven't read it already. Don't worry, I prepared before I came on here. But, you look at some of the teams ahead of them, and is the Clippers front office better than them? I wouldn't say so. I think, and that's just first glance. But, when you look at where the Wizards are, I think it's difficult because there's a lot of people looking at sort of what the timetable is and the trajectory of this team. And it's very, very young. It's finding as many young assets as possible, putting them all together, seeing who works. Oh, and then all of a sudden throwing in a couple of all-stars that fell out of favor with the teams they were in, Anthony Davis and Trae Young. Obviously different situations here. I've been a big fan of what this Wizards front office has done. I've said it countless times, and I've also criticized this organization plenty in the past for the way they've handled things, going back to Bradley Beal. And, they held on to Bradley Beal for far too long. It was a situation where they're sitting in NBA purgatory and they're just spinning their tires in that mud. We all know this, right? Like Adam Silver talked about this for a reason around the All-Star break, where tanking is a thing for a reason. That's how you rebuild your team. I'm sorry, that's just how the system's set up. You want to change it? We can talk about all these dumb ideas that people have that aren't going to work, but we can at least talk about them. The reality here is the Wizards are approaching this in a way that's smart. It's finally just said, look, we got to start this thing from scratch. We got to move on from everybody we have. We got to find as many young players as possible, pile up these assets, figure out what our core looks like, and then cross your fingers and hope that you're going to win the lottery this year, because they didn't have great lottery luck last year. Though I will say, you got yourself a steal even falling out of the lottery with Trae Johnson. So it's like you look at this situation and you say, okay, they've done a really good job with the blueprint that they've set. Now, if I'm going to look at specifically at what CBS Sports was talking about here, there's questions about Trae Young and Anthony Davis. And from what I saw in there, which I do understand, it's the trajectory of Anthony Davis, knowing that you got a supermax contract on the roster, and you're looking at somebody that consistently misses time, which is very true. Like, none of these are wrong. But with Trae Young, and I'm not a big fan of the Trae Young trade because I'm not a fan of Trae Young's game. He's very one-dimensional and very streaky. But if Trae Young is a short-term option and this team says, okay, we're obviously banking on a top 3 pick, let's say, in the draft. I mean, in terms of the assets that you have there and the talent, top 3 is going to really help this team out, even if it's not number 1 overall. And then we've got Trae Young and Anthony Davis sometimes out there, and it's enough to become a play-in team next year and take that next step. I'm okay with that, because what they've done is they've created a blueprint. They've got a plan, and then they've got steps to achieve those next goals. It's not just like, let's throw this at the wall and rebuild for the next 5 or 6 years. They're showing that they want to take that next step. Now, there's a lot that still has to work itself out. How much Anthony Davis do you get? Probably 40-something games a year, maybe for the next year or two or whatever, however long this looks, or maybe they trade him again. I don't think they sign him to an extension. I don't think that's smart. I've talked to a couple people that have said when it comes to a Trae Young situation, it's going to be a wait and see. So there's a chance he may get an extension there, and we'll see what he looks like with this Wizards team. I wouldn't do it, but there's a chance that that maybe happens. But at the same time, I like what this roster looks like right now. The key here, though, is that you can't continue to just have fun young kids forever. It has to then develop into something that becomes more consistent. And you see Alex Sarr from year 1 to year 2 and what he looks like. And so many of these other talented players that they've got on this roster, there's a lot of potential. It just has to develop. And I think you'll see them go up these rankings very quickly when you see what some of these other players can really do.
No, I completely agree, Nick. Eventually, you have to take off the training wheels and go out there and be competitive. The one thing that struck a nerve for me, and I'm assuming a lot of Wizards fans, was that Sam Quinn, that wrote the article, ranked Washington 22, their front office, but ranked the Utah Jazz 8. And he said, at full strength, the Jazz look ready to compete for a playoff spot next year, mind you, in the Western Conference. I'm fairly skeptical the Wizards will be able to do the same. Just your overall thoughts on that. What do you make of it?
Well, that I think is ridiculous to look at the Jazz and how bad they've been. And yes, they went out and got Jaren Jackson Jr., and then they sat him, and then they got fined, and they made it clear that they're clearly going to tank the rest of this way. Look, Utah does have some talent. They have a level of young talent that the Wizards have, but then you add a Lauri Markkanen in there, and you're starting looking at some of these other players that maybe give them a leg up. But they're also, I'd argue, at least a year or so ahead of the Wizards in terms of this gut rebuild, starting from scratch type deal. So they're not even on the same pace as to where they are, but I don't think that the Jazz should be a top 10 front office, given what the roster looks like, dropping the Wizards all the way down when they're very similar in that sense and their approach and what they've tried to build. I think that's where like the biggest outrage can be that I totally understand, where it's the difference between the two. If you put the Jazz at like 15 or 16 and you had the Wizards at 22, okay, we've seen a little more from the Jazz and where they're moving forward. And somebody like a Jared Jackson Jr. is going to bring more to the table than Anthony Davis. He's younger. I mean, he's dealt with his own injuries, but not to the level of Anthony Davis. There's a little more questions in terms of the two veterans that Washington added around the deadline. So, like, I could understand if they were closer. I have a problem with the Jazz being in the top 10 and us just thinking they're going to be a playoff team next year. I mean, have you seen the West? The West is loaded with talent. And I know they're talking about, like, back-end, maybe play-in tournament type team. But, dude, let's pump the brakes on, like, anointing the Jazz as, like, this team that's going to take a huge jump next year.
Yeah, I think maybe people are a little bit ahead of it when it comes to the Jazz and what they'll be. I know Lauri Markkanen, not very, very good player. He's a little bit older, I guess, comparative to some of the young players, I guess. Then Jaren Jackson Jr., I think, can provide a nice spark for them in the front court. One thing that I thought was intriguing about this list, and something I kind of related to the Wizards because I think about this team a lot because of all the luck they've had over the last couple of years. And Sam Quinn does mention, like, being lucky is part of being good, and he gives an explanation that, like, it's not a mutually exclusive thing. You can be lucky and good as a front office. The San Antonio Spurs are number 4 on this list. And if the Wizards had the same type of lottery luck that the San Antonio Spurs did to land Wembanyama, and I mean, I guess the Wizards had 2 in the same draft that Castle was drafted. So, like, you'll give credit to the Spurs front office there for getting Stephon Castle, who has looked like the 1A, 1B guy with Sarr for that draft class so far. But just given the lottery luck they had to even land Victor Wembanyama in 2023, does it make sense that they'd be ranked 18 spots ahead of the Wizards? Like, is 4 a little high given the circumstances of that?
The only thing with that, though, is if you look, I mean, there's a lot of other talent that was already on that roster. Look, they got Victor Wembanyama because we knew they were going to tank. We knew the Spurs were going after Wemby at all costs. It's like they'd be winning games through 3 quarters. And trust me, I did a betting show at this point, too, when they were playing. And you just fade the Spurs in the 4th quarter. And it was a guarantee that they would find a way to lose that game. And they were tanking, and we knew it. And they got the result that they wanted. But they go out and they get it, De'Aaron Fox, who obviously brings a whole new level to that. Yeah, Stephon Castle was there, and he's somebody that's clearly going to work out for them. But Dylan Harper, another, that's lottery luck where they jump 6 spots to be able to get Dylan Harper. But, you know, Devin Vassell is somebody that was there before all of this. That is certainly a talented player, a Keldon Johnson, who I understand is not in like the same role that he was before, but there was at least a foundation of other players that weren't franchise-altering players, but were still solid players, and then you go and do the De'Aaron Fox trade on top of that, and you see other pieces there, and it's enough for me to say it's more than just the lottery luck that they had. The Spurs have had a talented roster they've kind of just been sitting on for a while, wanting to build up. But you're right. I mean, like, luck is a part of this, and some organizations just get luckier than others. And let's remember, the Spurs got lucky when they got Tim Duncan and jumped up in the lottery years ago. So I don't know what type of spell they're casting down there in San Antonio or what basketball gods they're praying to, but it's working because the Spurs get a ton of lottery luck, and it's helped them. And there's a chance now that this Spurs team, with the guys they already had on the roster before, and the additions they made from the draft and the De'Aaron Fox and all that. I mean, we're looking at in the Western Conference, maybe Spurs Thunder is a rivalry, and those two teams competing for the Western Conference Finals year after year after year. I mean, we're talking 5, 6, maybe even 7 years down the road for these two teams.
Yeah, I'll definitely circle back to that actually in our NBA broader discussion in the third segment. But when we come back here on Locked On Wizards, Anthony Davis and Trae Young, what do the futures of those guys look like outside of the next year or so? We talk about that next. You ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into a reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right, flights, tickets, the whole experience. Can you believe that? If you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, not the Wizards, obviously, this is the perfect time to lock it in. I love futures this time of year, whether it's picking a team to win the championship or grab a conference title. It adds that extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. And now not only can you pick your cash, but you can send yourself to the NBA Finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on any NBA future and get entered for your chance to win an NBA trip to the Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. This episode of Locked On Wizards also brought to you by Quo. New year, new systems. And this is the time when a lot of us look at the messier parts of how we run our business and think there has to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communications is one of the quickest upgrades you can make. And that's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo. Spelled Quo, the smarter way to run your business communications. Because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, and you're just not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with customers. I love how simple Quo makes everything. Your whole team can call and text from one shared business number, so nothing gets missed. Everybody sees the full conversation thread. It makes replies faster and more personal. It works right from your phone or computer, and you can even keep your existing number. Quo's smart AI tools automatically log calls, summarize your conversations, and highlight next steps, so details never slip through the cracks. It's no surprise to me that Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams. Make this the year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/LockedOnNBA. That's QUO.com/LockedOnNBA. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers.
Nick, going back to AD and Trae, after the Wizards acquired them, if you were a betting man and had a bet on one being here long term, which one would it be?
I mean, it's got to be Trae Young, because Anthony Davis is way older and has more of an injury history. Not that Trae Young doesn't have his level of injury history that's there too, but the youth matters. It's like Trae Young becomes a veteran on this team that's full of guys that are 19, 20, 21 years old, to where it makes sense. Now, do I think that given the way this roster is set up, that actually makes sense long term? I mean, I don't, but for me, I understand that people look at this and they go, well, oh, Trae Young, and he adds this, he stretches the defense and he's going to get some shot opportunities for other guys. I mean, yes, to a point, but you're also then going to be taking away opportunities for these younger guys to truly develop. And that's where I am with this roster. Is that so much more important than anything else right now? Where in some ways you look and go, okay, did they jump the gun a little too soon? Did they do this a little bit too early, where trading for a couple of veterans and it's really pre-agency and it's more about next season and making that jump? You could make that argument, and I understand when people have that criticism of this front office, that being the case, but you do have somebody in Trae Young that you got for so cheap. I mean, they gave up nothing for him. Let's be honest with ourselves. Nobody wanted Trae Young besides the Wizards, so you had somebody, you really didn't have to give up really any assets because you were going to trade those guys away anyway. And the Anthony Davis side of things, those picks don't really matter that much, so neither one of these trades was one of those situations where you look and go, what are you doing? You're mortgaging your future. They were all trades where they were buying low. But if you're looking at more of a long-term solution, I mean, Trae Young's the obvious choice. Now, Anthony Davis is going to be under contract for a couple more seasons anyway, but you just at this point, and it sucks because Anthony Davis healthy is one of the best bigs in the NBA. I mean, he is, but we haven't seen that in a while. I mean, really, his whole time in Dallas, he looked uninterested. He's dealing with a lot of injuries. You got to question whether he even wanted to be there because obviously that trade came completely out of the blue for everybody involved except Nico Harrison. So it's like when it all comes down to it, out of those two, yeah, Trae Young makes the most sense as if you've got to pick one, he would be the longer term solution. But I'll be honest with you guys, I wouldn't sign either one of them to extensions. I would do this as a short term thing, give your organization more credibility, become hopefully at least a play-in tournament team next year, and then show we're a credible organization. We're run by a leadership group that cares about basketball, not just hockey now, which was the criticism for a long time. And a lot of reasons why players did not want to go there is they thought they cared too much about hockey. Well, now you're seeing there's an emphasis on rebuilding this team the right way, but you got to show that you're going to take that next step, and having that credibility and being at least in the play-in tournament next year gives them that opportunity, even if neither one of those guys are long-term solutions.
I'm thinking a little bit even further down the road here, Nick. I think this front office has an understanding here that to win a championship in the NBA, and we know their goal is to be a perennial contender, they don't want mediocrity and barely making the playoffs. They want a legitimate shot at winning this whole thing for years to come. With that being the case, I feel like this front office has an understanding you need a top 10 player in the league to realistically make that happen. I know they're hoping this year, the lottery, this is the year where it happens and you get the guy that's going to be your franchise piece for years to come. If it doesn't happen, though, would you be surprised to see this front office go out at some point, maybe next summer or something like that, and make that all-in type of trade to get who they think is the guy?
No, not at all. Because at some point you do have to take that next step. And if you look at the free agency class of 2027, if some of those names, if Giannis is still available, if Donovan Mitchell's out there, and those are just, two of the names, there's a lot more out there, but that's a free agency class that a lot of teams are looking ahead to. Well, let's say that the Wizards aren't going to be a player in that still, and they still have to show that they are a free agent destination. Well, the next best thing to do is go out and trade for that star that's going to be under contract for at least a couple of seasons. That would certainly what you're shooting for. And honestly, look, when you've got some ties to the Oklahoma City front office and the Wizards front office, that's what the Thunder did. And they did it starting with Chris Paul. Remember, Chris Paul and that Thunder team that was a 6th seed in the Western Conference, everybody thought they were rebuilding, and nobody even thought Chris Paul was going to stay there. The Thunder were at the point they were basement dwellers, completely rebuilding. Where the Wizards are now, it's a very, very similar plan. So if they go out and they use that approach of like, we're probably not going to get anybody in free agency, but we can take on a big contract. And maybe there's some other maneuvering where you also bring in one bad contract, get a first-round pick, but you're able to get a star on top of that because they've got so much cap space. And again, that depends on Trae Young and some of those contracts that they have to deal with. There's opportunities there. They've got flexibility, and that's what the most important thing is. But this front office knows that you can't continue to, at least from what we've seen, you can't continue to just be in perpetual rebuild mode forever. You've got to show that there's a next step because, look, Wizards fans are smart. I keep telling people this too, and this happens all the time, and I say this all the time on radio. It's like, yes, it is a football town in D.C., but it's a hoops town too, and NBA fans, basketball fans, Wizards fans are really damn smart and understand that a rebuild like this makes sense. And you have to do it. And most have been begging for it for years, as opposed to sitting right there in NBA purgatory, literally, right in the middle. But you can't do it forever. You can't do it forever. You eventually have to say, all right, we got to now take that next step. So I think once you get to that point, you see another year of development from Alex Sarr, and Keyshawn George shows that, he's taken that next step. It's all about the growth of the young guys. Then you say, okay, we got to pair them with hopefully the number 1 overall pick that you get in this lottery this summer. And then on top of that, you make an aggressive move for a star that you can trade a couple of some of your other young guys. Then maybe you're moving a first-round pick down the road because you've got enough young players. That's sort of the next step in the evolution of this team, and I think that's what we'll probably see in about a year.
No, that's a good point, Nick, because it's frustrating. So many casual fans will just think the Wizards are supposed to be bad forever. But when this team starts competing, it's like, oh my, they're building something there in the district. Just a hypothetical, if the lottery gods are on our side, if the Wizards land number 1, what is the ceiling for this team next season, Nick?
I mean, they're definitely playing team. I would argue that they're a team that could maybe compete in a wide open Eastern Conference for that, not having to worry about the play-in tournament, 6 seed and up. I mean, we're talking like squeaking into that point, but a lot of this is who they obviously get. And like you said, if it's it doesn't even have to be the number one overall pick. I mean, you've got at least 3 choices in Boozer and Peterson and DeBansta, at least in top 3, where you're looking at it going, okay, these guys can all change the trajectory of this organization. And don't even worry about position and fit. Just draft the most talented player. That's all this team really needs right now. But if you add one of those guys and they contribute right away and there's not a significant adjustment period, which can still happen in the NBA, this is a team right there that has enough talent with some of the growth of the guys they have. There's, what they can maybe do in the offseason, some secondary pieces, adding a couple of veterans. I mean, look, I this is a failure next year if this team is not at least in the play-in tournament. That's where the expectation should be, and that's low end. That's talking just 10 seed, bare minimum. It's a failure if they can't reach that point by the end of next year. But I do think that barring, everybody staying relatively healthy and the roster they've even got right now, even if they fall in the lottery, we're not hoping for it, but even if they do, they're still in a position where they should be competing in that play-in tournament. So that, to me, is the basement for them.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it's play-in kind of or bust, at least for next year. Then you can kind of, if things fail, you can regroup and see what you're looking at in terms of the next year. Maybe you try to take the next step from there. But good point. All right, let's talk a little bit broader NBA here with Nick Ashooh when we come back. Workplace chaos, deadline stacking up, the inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for: skills, experience, and location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. Here's a stat that says it all. The minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes, and less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about it on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. So one thing over the weekend, Adam Silver got a ton of comments about tanking and the NBA, the whole state of it. And he was like, NBA fans, they don't want to see their team not competing every single night. Like, NBA fans don't want to see that. And I was kind of like, hey, right here, I signed up for the Wizards to do this, by the way. I wanted to see this for a couple of seasons. So it's just funny that it kind of works out like that. But obviously, from what you said earlier in the episode about how there's a lot of stupid ideas that exist about there about how they'll handle the draft lottery, I can kind of tell where you fall in terms of this conversation. I think the majority of Wizards fans would align with your thinking here, but what have been your overall thoughts about the uproar that we've seen from the league about tanking?
First off, everybody talks about tanking in the NBA, but you're not guaranteed the number 1 overall pick with the worst record. Go to the NFL. You have the worst record, like the Raiders. You've got the number 1 overall pick. So it's like nobody talks about it in the NFL like they do in the NBA. And I get it. It's you don't have as many rounds and as many draft picks. So like you can find picks in other rounds in the NFL that you can't in the NBA. That first round pick is so much more valuable than it even is in the NFL. I get all that. But this whole concept that we're going to sit here and find a perfect solution for this. I mean, I've seen people talking about a tournament at the end of the year for teams competing for the number 1 overall pick. What? So bad teams can be like, yeah, let's go win so we can get the number 1 overall pick, and then they can cut me and they can draft this guy. Like, what are we doing? It's not going to work. Or even worse, abolish the draft and just let it be free agency. Oh, that'll work. Because have you seen what happens when teams have more money than others? Like, look at baseball right now dealing with the Dodgers. And that's just one. Like, what, you think the Lakers aren't going to go after and try to, I mean, just name team here that has more money. I mean, I understand they'd probably put some stopgaps in place that somehow prevent it. What are we doing? Look, there's not going to be a perfect solution here for this. But what the NBA has at least done now in smoothing out these odds a lot more, we've just watched massive jumps in the lottery the last couple of seasons. The Hawks went from 10-1. Thankfully, they did. And the Wizards got the better end of that deal in 2023 when they had the number 2 overall pick. But we just watched the Mavs jump and conspiracy theorists are out there, and I understand that, but the reality is they went from 11-1. Yeah, I see you guys making faces. It is true. That's how we feel. But you also watch the Spurs go up 6 spots. We've seen this plenty. And if you even go back and look at the history when they started weighting the actual lottery, going back to 1990 was the first year they did it. There was a stretch for about 15 years where I think only 2 teams that had the worst record got the number 1 overall pick before LeBron in 2023 in the Cavs. And you started to see the Magic getting Dwight Howard, and there was a little bit more of worst team gets number 1 overall pick. But this whole concept that, tanking is just ruining the game. Nobody cares about these bad teams at the end of the season anyway. They want to ride out their season and get better. And I'd rather see them tank the hell out of their season and try to reapproach getting back into the playoffs with a play-in tournament, which was created to allow more teams an opportunity late in the season to compete for a playoff spot versus trying to tank late in the year. Look, there's not going to be a perfect system, but let's not overthink this to the point where it's just like, yeah, let's throw another tournament into the season. We got enough tournaments, and I like the NBA Cup, and I love the play-in tournament. We don't need a tournament for like, hey, worst team, you need to now be a good team all of a sudden and win so you can get the number 1 overall pick. Players don't tank, organizations tank. Front offices tank, and that's the difference. You throw a bunch of players out there late in the season, what are you going to we want to win, but we want to win so another guy can get drafted or maybe we can get I understand people are thinking out loud and some of this is brainstorming, but there is not going to be a perfect solution to this. And in the end, you would rather see teams like you're actually being competitive by losing games in a season. Your playoffs are completely out of reach. The Wizards are being competitive right now. It's just ass backwards because you're waiting for them to get a good lottery pick to then shoot up next year and become a playoff team. And that's really what this is all about. I think Mark Cuban said something along those lines where it was like, let them all tank. Like fans understand the game, and this is how you fix bad teams. It's better than having somebody that doesn't have money or a smaller market team trying to compete for franchise altering players that aren't going to be drafted, and you got to compete with the Lakers or the Knicks or name any other big market team here that's desperate that's going to throw money at them, even with whatever fail-safe they had. It's just we're losing our minds with this. We've got to calm down and realize that there's not going to be a perfect solution. The lottery has gotten to the point now where it's at least reasonable. And in the end, here's the thing. If a team knows they're out of the playoffs, it doesn't matter what the odds are. They're going to try and lose games because they're already out of the playoffs. So why sit in NBA purgatory? That's the worst place to be, is right in the middle there.
Yeah, I completely agree. Amen. I think, Nick, it's funny that you see teams like the Utah Jazz, Indiana Pacers get fined $500,000, $100,000. But if I'm a Wizards fan and I'm taking on little fines, I'll pay for it to get a guy like AJ DeBonza, Darren Peterson, Cam Boozer. Why not? Because those guys are blue chip players. They're going to be the reason why I'm not going to be in the lottery system next season. And until those bad teams, small market teams get those type of guys, they're just going to it's a hamster wheel. They're going to be in that cycle for so long. Just your overall thoughts on that.
Do you remember late in the season when the Knicks owned the Mavs pick? It was from the Kristaps Porzingis trade, I think, and the Mavs basically had to lose late in the season, and they sat like Luka, and I think Kyrie was still there, if I remember correctly, and they sat them all at halftime, and the NBA ended up fining them. It was like $500,000. It was something like that. This is probably, so Luka was still there, so we're talking, it might have been 3 years ago, whatever it was. If you're the Mavs, it was the same thing. Like, of course you were going to do that. If you have an opportunity to keep your draft pick, what's $500,000? You think the Pacers or the Jazz care about that? No. And that's the whole point of this, is like, you have created a system that does actually give teams that are at the bottom an opportunity to get talent and rebuild their roster. Now, you have to draft well. You've got to be able to identify that talent. It's got to fit on your roster, all of these things. But we also know that having the number 1 or number 2 overall pick doesn't guarantee that that player is going to work out. We have seen players that are drafted 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever. We have seen those players contribute. Maybe they're not always franchise-altering players. There's no guarantee you're going to get that at the top of the draft either. Ask the Hawks with Zachary Risachet. How's that worked out? So it's like there's no guarantees. And I know people weren't tanking for that draft that much, although Alex Sarr, obviously now we're seeing, again, how the Wizards lucked out there. But, there are teams know what wins, and they have these conversations behind the scenes. And a lot of this, too, with Adam Silver this is image protection, right? It's to show your TV partners, we want everything to be competitive late in the season. Nobody is watching the Jazz and Pacers on Prime late in an NBA season anyway, so who cares? Put the good teams on that are in the playoffs anyway. That's all that matters. It's a star-driven league. We want the competitive games late. We don't want to watch teams that are tanking anyway, so who cares if they're losing because they're not going to be on national TV anyway.
All right, real quick before we get you out of here, Nick, I know you're a betting man, so I wanted to get your thoughts on this because I don't know if I'm naive to the situation. I don't know how much you know about it, so if you don't know a lot, perfectly understandable. This Giannis stuff and his partnership with Kalashi Sports is puzzling to me because we are so caught up in these rumors that he is going to get traded, that he's kind of signaled, like, he never said, like, hey, I want you guys to trade me. He was kind of like, hey, if you trade me, that's cool, by the way. Like, it's fine, which I don't understand this gimmick that Giannis has been upon there. He clearly, like, wants out, in my opinion, and it'd be best for both parties if they just traded him. But then there's, like, $23 million put into this market of whether or not he's going to be traded, and then he comes out, like, 2 days later as a partner with this app. Like, is there something fishy going on there with that? Like, what is your stance on this?
So this is why there is a big fight with predictive markets versus actual sports books now, and this is why there's a big push to keep them out. Polymarket, Kalshi, some of these different ones, because it's far beyond just like regulated traditional bets. And if you look at some markets, just from a betting standpoint, state by state it varies. In the state of Virginia, for example, you can't bet on the awards market, but you can in Maryland. You can't bet on player props in college in Maryland, but you can in DC. So these are different areas that you're going to have a level of regulation. Predictive market is different because there's so many more variables and things that could just happen in life that can be manipulated. I mean, how many times have we now seen somebody betting on a streaker at the Super Bowl? We just saw that. I mean, that was a thing. You're not going to get that in domestic markets from a betting standpoint, but you can get them offshore and you can get those in predictive markets as well. And, they're not, I don't want to get into the minutia of some of the, it's going to bore people if I get into some of all of those details. But the point here is that there is an investment with Giannis. And you could at least make the argument that there could be some level of manipulation where people will know and be close with him to know he's going to get traded. And you trade that, Giannis getting traded it's not betting, it's trading. And I understand where people are with this. And this is a whole new world. But the predictive markets aren't going away. And that's where the next gold rush really is it's not sports books. I mean, it is. Sports books are killing it. But predictive markets are the next thing. I think Fanatics just launched one too, and you continue to see this, and there's going to be more and more in this, and you've got to be really, really careful with athletes' involvement in this. I know the NBA came out and basically said it was such a small investment that they're not overly worried in it, but you're not just talking about like, will a player score X amount of points? You're talking about something bigger that can be controlled to a point behind the scenes in terms of a player getting traded. And to your point, by the way, Giannis is gone. Giannis is gone this summer. When you get to a point where you're booing the fans back and you're calling out your teammates, the window closed for the Bucks the minute the Dame trade didn't work. I mean, we knew at that point after a year, Dame didn't want to be there. It was just not going to work. The Bucks window closed. It's time for them to move on. And they were smart to wait until the summer because you can see what the draft lottery looks like, especially if a team jumps and says, we'd rather have Giannis than a young kid that's going to maybe take a couple of seasons. There's opportunities there. But yeah, Giannis is gone this summer. I don't think there's any chance he's back in Milwaukee.
Do you see him going west, Nick?
I think the Bucks would rather send him west. I think that's definitely going to be what they're looking to do. And honestly, if you're looking at the Western Conference right now, there are teams that are in a spot where they say this is our last chance, right, to compete in the Western Conference. And the first team that obviously comes to mind is the Warriors. And Steph's still got enough left in the tank where you can try and squeeze all of the juice out of that era that you can. And we know the Warriors were aggressive. They wanted to try to get him at the deadline. I think they'll be very aggressive again this offseason, maybe a little bit more to even offer, where you can talk about a pick down the road. Because the Warriors are looking at this going, once this era is done, we're going to be so gutted anyway. It's going to take years to rebuild. We might as well do what the Rams did years ago, right? F them picks, trade a bunch of first rounders, and then win a Super Bowl. It's the same thing for the Warriors, where you look at the Western Conference. We talked about the Thunder and Spurs. The Thunder and Spurs could be competing for the top of the Western Conference for the next 5, 6, 7 years, whatever the case is. And if you sit there and look at where the Warriors are, if you think Giannis and Steph Curry with some other pieces kind of put around him can get you at least to compete near that top spot, I don't think that's enough, but they certainly think that that could be enough. And I think there's going to be a lot of teams out west that look at this and say, we want to do this just so we can compete for the next 3 to 4 years. But at the same time, the East is wide open. So there's going to be teams in the East that have a different mindset of it's not just staying relevant. It's looking that we can maybe break through because do you trust Detroit yet? No, they haven't shown that they can win a title. Do you trust the Knicks? I mean, not, like every team in the Eastern Conference, and even Jason Tatum next year coming back for Boston, unless it's this year, coming back from a torn Achilles takes time. It's one to be ready physically to play. It's another to actually get back in game shape and get ready to go. So it's interesting because the West is much more about competition with younger teams that are going to be at the top for a while. The East is much more vulnerable and wide open. So you're going to have a different mindset from teams in both conferences.
It's crazy timing that we were talking about this in a report literally just came out. I got the notification with a quote from Giannis. I don't know if I'll leave. It's not up to me. If it was up to me, maybe I already would have left. This dude pisses me off, man.
Stop.
All right, we'll end the episode on that because this guy actually just bothers me so much at this point. Nick,
just stop it. Just say.
Thank you for making some time for us today, Nick.
Those guys.
All right, that'll do it for us today here at the Locked On Wizards podcast. Thank you to our guest, Nick Ashooh. Be sure to check him out, part of the Locked On family with the Locked On Commander Squad show, and he hosts Game Day Garage. You can check that out on YouTube. For my co-host, Abdullah Ayubi, I'm Ben Strober. Talk to you later, DC family.